In October of 1974, a man named Ovid Guidry pulled a pirogue up a bayou in the Atchafalaya that his family had trapped for 4 generations and came around the bend into a steel gate. Chain on it. New posts sunk in the mud. A yellow sign wired to the crossbar with a company name on it he had never heard of in his life. His grandfather ran that line. His great-grandfather ran that line. There was a camp of his family's about a mile past that gate with a stove in it. He was 61 years old. He sat in that pirogue for a while, and then he turned around and pulled back out, and he never went up that bayou again. Nobody arrested him. Nobody had to. The water did not change, and the marsh did not change, and the muskrats did not change. Somebody just wrote his name off a piece of paper he had never seen. Now here is the twist. What happened to Ovid Guidry at that gate is what happened to about everything else his family did on that water. Not with a raid, with paperwork. And the record now says the men in the suits had most of it exactly backwards, because half of what they made hard, the universities and the state agencies have spent the last 20 years quietly walking back, re-endorsing, and in one case actually paying people to do again. Every one of the 25 old ways I am about to walk you through still works. Not one of them stopped working. And most people watching this could not do a single one of them if the power went out Tuesday. If you want the whole of it in one place, the boucherie, the pantry, curing, canning, the plants that heal, and the ones that hurt, it is all in the one book at gushebert.com, link below, and tap subscribe while you are down there, not for me, but because we drag one of these back into the daylight every week. I am Gus Hebert. 7th generation in the Atchafalaya Basin. My people came down out of Nova Scotia in 1765 when the English put them on boats, and no Hebert has left this water since. My daddy died in the oil field out of Morgan City when I was 9, and my grandfather Alcide raised me from there. Everybody called him Pépère. He kept a ledger wrapped in oilcloth against the damp from 1938 until he died at 91. And he made me swear the old ways would not die with me. Some of what I am counting down is flat out against the law today. Some of it is legal and just got forgotten. Number 16 will get you fined in this state for something your grandmother sold at her front gate. Number 8 they wrote a federal law against in 1918, and about every Cajun family in this state broke it every winter for 100 years. Number 3. There are men who can still build one, and you could fit all of them in a church hall. And number 6, number 6, they wrote federal law against in 1862, and I am not touching it until we are most of the way down. None of these faded because they quit working. They faded because somebody got paid the day you forgot them. That is not on you, neighbor. They are good at selling. 25 down to 1, and the question is not what we lost. It is who profited when we forgot, and how you take it back. Number 25, the grease can on the back of the stove. Every drop off the skillet went in a coffee can and got strained through cloth when it filled. She fried in it, she started her okra in it, she greased the cornbread pan. Cost her nothing because it was going down the sink anyway. Then in 1911, Procter & Gamble put Crisco on the shelf and spent 60 years telling this country animal fat would stop your heart. Nobody outlawed the can. They just made her feel dirty for keeping it. The can never lied. The label did. That is the grease. Next one they wrote a safety rule about. Number 24, lye soap from wood ash. Hardwood ash in a barrel with a hole in the bottom. Rainwater poured through it. Brown lye water caught underneath. Cook that with the lard off the hog, and you have 20 pounds of soap out of 2 things you are throwing away. Nobody ever banned making it for your own house, and that is still true today. What happened is Colgate and Procter & Gamble made a bar cheaper than the afternoon it took, and the knowledge walked out the door on its own. Now go stand at a farmer's market and look at that same bar with a paper band on it. $6. $9 if it says tallow. That is the soap. Next one you slept on. Number 23, Spanish moss mattresses. This was not a hard times fix. This was an industry. Green moss pulled out of the live oaks, buried or soaked until the gray outside rotted away and left the black springy fiber inside, then cured, then run through a moss gin. Louisiana had moss gins running commercially into the middle of the last century, and that fiber-stuffed mattresses, church pews, and the seats of automobiles coming off the line in Detroit. It went away in the 1950s when foam rubber came in, and it went away fast. Nobody outlawed the moss. It is still hanging in every oak from here to Houma. There is just nobody left buying it. That is the bed. Next one is the water. Number 22, the cistern. Before a rural water line ever came down these roads, a Louisiana house caught its own. Tin roof, gutter, and a cypress or concrete cistern on the north side. And this state gets 50, 60 inches of rain a year. 1,000 square feet of roof in 60-inch country will put better than 30,000 gallons in your tank in a year for free. Colorado made catching rain technically illegal for a century over water rights. Louisiana never did, and Louisiana never had to, because once the line came past the house, the parish had a customer, and the cistern turned into a place to throw yard tools. That is the water. Next one is the cold. Number 21, the safe, not the cellar. Everybody up north tells you to dig a root cellar. You cannot dig a root cellar in South Louisiana. Hit water at 3 feet in most of this basin, and you have got a well, not a cellar. So the answer down here was different. A screened wooden safe, punched tin or wire cloth, up off the ground on legs with the legs standing in cans of water so the ants could not climb. Sitting in the shade on the north side of the house where a breeze runs under it. Kept the flies off, kept the air moving, kept things a good deal cooler than the room. That is why your great-grandmother had a pie safe and not a hole in the hill. Different dirt, different answer. First pattern break. Everything so far was legal, cheap, and it worked. From here down, we get into ways somebody wrote a rule against, so you would have to pay a man to do what she did for nothing. Number 20, gray water to the garden. Wash water out of the tub, went out the wall, and into the tomatoes and the fig tree. Nobody thought about it twice. Then state plumbing codes through the 70s and 80s classified every drop of household water as sewage and required it discharged to a system. Not federal law, state and local, and the folks selling water by the gallon did not fight it. And yet the Environmental Protection Agency's own water reuse guidance says treated and managed gray water is a legitimate way to cut your outdoor demand. The fig tree knew what to do with it. The parish just wanted its cut. That is the water going out. Next one is what you put in the ground. Number 19, saving your own seed. He let the best tomato on the vine go soft, scooped the seed onto newspaper, dried it, and put it in an envelope in a jar on a shelf in the shed. Same tomato every year for 40 years. Congress passed the Plant Patent Act in 1930, the Plant Variety Protection Act in 1970, and the Supreme Court decided Bowman against Monsanto in 2013, and the seed companies sold hybrids that do not breed true, so you buy again every spring. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has called farmer-saved seed fundamental to agricultural resilience. The seed is older than the patent. That is the seed. Next one they scared a whole generation off of. Number 18. Putting up in jars, 50 to 100 quarts a season out of one garden. Figs, peaches, snap beans, tomatoes, pepper jelly. Ball jars ran a dime apiece in the 1930s. Then in 1988, the Department of Agriculture revised the whole home canning guide after botulism cases and pushed pressure canning for low-acid food. That revision was correct, and I am not going to sit here and tell you it was not. But the effect on this country was that a whole generation decided canning was too dangerous to try at all. The current guidance says plainly that boiling water bath is safe for acid foods with tested recipes. The fig does not know what year it is. That is the pantry. Next one, she sold at the gate, and you cannot. Number 17. selling it at the front gate. Eggs, a sack of pecans, fig preserves on a plank table with a coffee can for the money. No license, no inspection, no sign. Through most of the last century, that was just how a rural parish moved food. Then health and agriculture codes went up around every bit of it. Louisiana did pass a cottage food law in 2013 that carved out room for some of it again. And that was a real fix, but it is narrow. It names which foods qualify, and it caps what you can move in a year. So she can sell her jelly. She cannot sell most of what was on that table in 1950. That is the table. Next one is in the cow. Number 16, milk from the family cow. Milk, cream, butter, buttermilk for the biscuits, way to the hogs. The Standard Milk Ordinance came out of the United States Public Health Service in 1924, and states adopted it one by one, and pasteurization for retail sale became the rule. Correct in intent. But Louisiana today is one of the states where you cannot legally sell raw milk for people to drink at all. Your own cow, your own glass, that is a different thing. Selling it is not. And I am telling you where the line is, not telling you to cross it. Second pattern break. From here on down, every one of these has a rule against it sitting in a code book that somebody paid a lobbyist to write. And number 6 is getting closer. Number 15, hens in the yard. 6 to 12 birds behind every house in this state, 300 eggs a year a bird, and the feed was table scraps and whatever they scratched up. Then post-war suburban zoning classified poultry as livestock and banned it off residential lots. Right about the same time Tyson was building an industrial poultry business out of Arkansas. 6 hens in your yard was competition. In the last 15 years, better than 100 American cities have written hens back into their ordinances. The hen never left. The rule book did. That is the yard. Next one is the whole hog and the whole neighborhood. Number 14, the boucherie. Cold Saturday in January, 1 hog, and everybody on that road in the yard by daylight. 1 man on the killing, the women on the sausage, somebody on the cracklins in the big black pot, somebody rendering the lard, the boudin going into casings by dinner. Nothing wasted, not the head, not the blood, not the feet. And every family there went home with meat because next month it was going to be at somebody else's house. Now, the Federal Meat Inspection Act of 1906 regulated commercial packers, and there has always been an exemption in federal law for an animal you raise and butcher for your own household. That never went away. What went away was 20 people who knew what to do with a hog and had a free Saturday. That is the hog. Next one is what you hang. Number 13, the smokehouse. Salt, cure, and cool smoke off green pecan or oak, and a shoulder keeps 9 months without a wire coming in the wall. Down here, that is where tasso comes from, and andouille, and the sausage that makes a gumbo taste like a gumbo. Federal law never touched your own smokehouse. What got it were municipal fire codes and zoning that make putting up a new one a permit fight in most incorporated places, while the packers sold you plastic-wrapped ham at $9 a pound. The Department of Agriculture's own Food Safety Service still says on the record that salt curing combined with smoking preserves meat effectively when it is done to standard. That is the meat. Next one is legal and about nobody knows it. Number 12, muscadine and blackberry wine in the shed. Fruit off a fence line that was going to the birds anyway, sugar, a crock, and a piece of cloth over the top. Here is the part worth knowing. Making wine and beer at home for your own use was actually federally illegal for a stretch after Prohibition ended, a leftover nobody bothered to fix until 1978 when President Carter signed the bill that fixed it. Today, you can make 100 gallons a year as an adult, 200 in a household with 2 for your own use, with no permit at all. It is legal right now. Most people have no idea, which tells you something about how quiet the fixing of a law is compared to the writing of one. That is the wine. Next one is the roof over all of it. Number 11, palmetto and cypress. The first Acadian shelters in this country were posts in the ground with palmetto fronds layered over them, and palmetto sheds water beautifully because it evolved to do exactly that. Then cypress, which grows out of this water, will not rot and will not take a termite, and every old house on high ground down here is built out of it. Then the timber companies cut this basin flat between about 1890 and 1925 and took the old growth out, and now what is left is mostly protected or grown back young. Nobody outlawed building with cypress. They took the trees first. Third pattern break. Fourth of the way from the end, and here I have to be honest with you because we are going into the deep water. Not everything I count from here down is legal in your parish today. I will tell you where the line sits on each one, and you check your own before you cross it. Number 10, trot lines, limb lines, jug lines. A line across a bayou with drops off it, or a hook off a willow limb bent over the water, baited at dark and run at daylight. That is not sport fishing, that is food, and it feeds a family while the man who said it is asleep. This one is still legal in Louisiana, and I want to be clear about that, but it is licensed, and there are rules on tagging your lines, marking them, and how often you run them. And those rules exist because unattended gear left to rot is a real problem. Get the license, read the tag rule, then set your lines the way your grandfather did. That is the line. Next one is the gig. Number 9, frogs and turtle. Bullfrogs out of a pirogue at night with a light and a gig, and a snapping turtle out of a bayou for a sauce piquante. And both of those were ordinary supper in this state. Both are still legal, and both are seasoned and regulated now, with a closed season on frogs in the spring while they spawn, and rules on turtle. The regulation is not the villain here. The villain is that a whole generation grew up in South Louisiana without ever once being in a boat at night with a light, and does not know a bullfrog from a pig frog by the sound of it. That is the night. Next one is genuinely against federal law, and your great-grandmother did it every winter. Number 8, songbirds. I told you at the top I would get here. Robins. Down here they were called grives, and they came through by the thousands in the cold months, and Cajun families killed them and ate them in a stew and thought no more about it than you think about a plate of chicken. Same with blackbirds. Then, in 1918, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act made it a federal crime to kill or possess almost any migratory bird in this country, robins included, and it is still a federal crime today. I am not telling you to do it. I am telling you it happened in this state, in living memory, in nearly every family on this bayou. And I will say the honest part, which is that the market hunters of that era were emptying the sky. And that law is a big part of why there are still birds in it. That is the sky. Next one they voted on, number 7, the gill net, entangling nets across a pass, set on a tide, and a family made a year's living out of it and had been for 200 years. In the mid-1990s, Louisiana banned entangling nets in state waters for commercial fishing, and that fight was as ugly as any political fight this state has had, and it split parishes down the middle. There were real arguments on both sides about bycatch and about stocks. There were also sport fishing interests with a great deal of money in the fight. What is not arguable is what happened after. A whole class of independent commercial fishermen down here stopped being able to work, and the boats came out of the water, and the families went and got jobs. Number 6, here it is. Home distilling. Copper pot, copper worm, a fire under it, corn or cane or fruit fermented first. This is the oldest liquor-making technology in the Western world, and there is not a thing complicated about it. Now here is the line straight, because I said I would give it to you straight. Federal law, Title 26 of the United States Code, Section 5601, makes distilling spirits without a federal permit and bond a felony. The modern shape of that law traces back to the Internal Revenue Act of 1862, when the federal government wanted the excise tax that legal distillers were paying. It has never come off the books. Owning a still is not the crime. Running one is. I am not telling you to do it. I am telling you it exists, and I am telling you why it exists. And it was never once about the quality of what came out of it. Fourth and final pattern break. 5 left. Number 3 is the one you can go look at behind glass in Lafayette. Number 1 is what all 25 have been pointing at. Number 5, the trap line. Muskrat and mink and otter out of this marsh, and from about 1920 to 1950, Louisiana was the biggest fur-producing state in the country, not Alaska. Here, whole families lived on it, moved to camps in the marsh for the season, and a boy learned to skin before he learned to drive. Then the fur market collapsed in the 1980s under a campaign against wearing it, and the price went to nothing, and the trappers quit. And then the nutria, which is not native and which had gotten loose here decades before, ate the marsh, ate the roots out from under it. Louisiana is losing coastal land at a rate that has been on the front page of every paper in this country. So the state started a program to pay a bounty on nutria tails, a few dollars a tail, to get people back out there doing what they had quit doing. Read that again. They paid people to start trapping again. That is the whole thesis of this channel in one item. That is the fur. Next one is the biggest reversal in this state's history. Number 4, the alligator. Hunted commercially down here forever, then hunted so hard that by 1962, Louisiana closed the season completely because the animal was in real trouble. That closure was correct. Then in 1972, the state opened a tightly controlled program built on tags, seasons, and landowner participation. And the population came back from something like 100,000 animals to well over 2 million. And Louisiana's alligator program is now cited around the world as one of the great wildlife recoveries. So on this one, the regulation is the hero. I am not going to tell you otherwise just because it fits the video better. The point is that the knowledge how to set a line, how to bait it, how to handle the animal, that stayed alive in the families that stayed in it, and it would have died in 20 years if it had not. That is the gator. Next one, there are not many men left who can make. Number 3, the pirogue. Cypress, shaped by hand. And the classic ones were a single log dug out. A pirogue draws about nothing. And that is the entire point, because a boat that floats in 3 inches of water goes where a marsh actually is. Light enough for a man to shoulder over a levee. Silent, fixable with what grows beside the water. Then aluminum came in after the war, and then fiberglass. And now the working boat down here is a mud boat with a motor on it. And there is nothing wrong with that at all. But you can go to the Acadian Cultural Center in Lafayette and look at pirogues behind glass, which is where a thing goes when the last hands that made it are gone. The men who can still build one by hand from a log, you could fit all of them in a church hall and have room left over. That is the boat. Next one is the medicine cabinet out the back door. Number 2, the traiteur and the plant shelf. Every community on this water had a traiteur, a healer, usually a woman who treated with prayer and with plants. And the tradition passed one direction only, older to younger, and never for money. And behind her there was a shelf, mullein for a cough, elderberry for a winter fever, plantain leaf on a sting, willow bark, which is where aspirin came from in the first place. The Federal Trade Commission Act of 1914 and everything built on it since gave federal authority over health claims, and the moment you say a plant treats a condition, you are over a line the drug industry spent a century drawing. The plant itself was never outlawed. The National Institutes of Health has published that elderberry has documented antiviral activity against influenza. It grows wild about 400 yards from where I am sitting, which brings us to the top. Number 1 is not a trick, friend. Number 1 is what all 24 were pointing at, and you cannot buy it and you cannot build it. You decide it. Sovereignty. The old word for it was independence. And down here it meant a specific thing. It meant you owned your own water, your own food, your own heat, your own light, and your own name. And no man could put a piece of paper in your mailbox that turned you into a tenant on your own life. Every one of these is a brick in that wall. The rain in the cistern is a brick. The jar on the shelf is a brick. The seed in the envelope. The soap in the mold. The hog in January. Every one of them is a payment somebody is not taking out of you anymore. Ovid Guidry sat in that pirogue in front of that gate in 1974 with 4 generations behind him and nothing at all in front of him. And the thing that took his trapping ground was not a warden and not a law. It was that somewhere along the line the paper got to matter more than the knowing, and once that happens, you are only as free as the last document anybody signed about you. Here is what I did not tell you at the top. Ovid Guidry died in 1991, and he never got back up that bayou. But he taught 3 men on this water how to run a line, and one of them taught my grandfather's neighbor, and that man taught me to skin a muskrat on a plank behind his shed when I was 13. So they got the water. They did not get the knowing. The knowing walked right around that gate, and it came out here, in this house, 30 years later. And I will say the honest thing before we close. I am not selling you fear, and I am not telling you the sky is coming down. Some of what I laid out here your parish looks at sideways, and I told you which ones. Some of it, the gator and the frog season and the bird law, the regulation is genuinely doing its job, and I'm not going to pretend different so the video sounds better. And a good deal of it has been quietly walking back the other way for 20 years now. They legalized homebrew in 1978. They wrote hens back into 100 city codes. They passed a cottage food law in this state in 2013. And they are out there right now paying men to trap the marsh again. The record now says they had a lot of it backwards. The question is what you do with that. So do not try all 25. Pick one, just one, this week. Start the grease can by the stove, that is tonight. Put a barrel under one downspout, that is Saturday. Save the seed out of one tomato this fall, that is 10 minutes in September. And if you want the rest of it, the boucherie, the pantry, putting up a hog, the plants that heal and the ones that hurt, it is all in the one book at gushebert.com. I ran the numbers on my own place last year. Between the garden, the birds, the water off the roof, and what comes out of this basin, I do not spend $200 a month where the average house in this country spends $900. That is not a boast, neighbor. That is arithmetic. Tell me down below, did your people do any of these? Which one? Did somebody in your family run a trap line or keep a cistern or hold a boucherie every January? Name it. The one that gets the most replies is the one I go deep on next. If this was worth your time, hit the like on it. It puts it in front of somebody whose grandfather knew every one of these and never got the chance to hand them down. And subscribe if you want the next one, because we pull one back into the daylight every week. Next time out, there is a cut off a hog that every butcher in this state used to hand across the counter for free. And by 1980, it was gone off every counter in Louisiana. I will show you what it is, what she did with it, and the year the packers worked out they could sell it back to you at $9 a pound. There's another one up on your screen right now. YouTube put it there. Go on and take it. Keep the old ways, friend. Do not let them go under.